All right, let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how to nail your LO1 assignment. We'll give you the formulas, the structure, and all the top tips you need to get the grade you're aiming for. So, are you feeling the pressure a little bit? I get it. That deadline, the 24th, is coming up fast. But hey, don't worry. By the end of this, we're going to build a really clear plan together so you can turn that stress into a solid piece of work. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the main mission, then we'll break down the exact formulas for P1, P2, and M1. And finally, we'll pull it all together into a super simple blueprint you can just follow. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, first things first. Your entire focus for LO1 is the Meadows group. Every single point you make has to be grounded in this specific case study. And look, this is non-negotiable. It's probably the single most important rule for this entire assignment. So you really need to get to know these three services inside and out. You've got the residential home, the nursing home for folks with more complex needs like dementia, and the short stay center for rehab. You have to refer to these by name, especially when we get to the comparison part in part 2. And this, right here, this is the golden rule. Think of it this way. If you write a paragraph that could just be copy-pasted into an essay about any care home, it's way too generic. You have to keep naming the specific Meadows service you're talking about. That's what gets you the marks. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, starting with P1. This section is all about describing some common terms, but there's a specific formula you've got to follow to do it right. The brief says describe the terms, right? But, and this is key, a simple dictionary definition is not going to cut it. To really score well, you need to follow a clear structure for every single term. And here it is. This is your recipe for success for P1. Seriously, follow these 4 steps for every single term you discuss, and you are golden. It's a simple but really powerful formula. Okay, so let's put this into practice. Let's take the term standard precautions. First, you name it. Then, step 2, you define it in your own words. You know, these are the basic things you do with everyone all the time because you just can't see germs. Now, what's so great about this slide is how it pulls all 4 of those steps together into a perfect paragraph. It defines the term, explains why it's important, and then, here's the magic part, it links it directly to the Meadows nursing home, mentioning the vulnerable residents there. That's the level of detail we're after. All right, P1 formula, check. Let's level up and move on to P2. Now, the key skill here shifts a bit. It's not just about describing anymore. It's all about comparing the risks across the different Meadows services. Okay, here is the absolute non-negotiable rule for P2. You can't just list the risks for each place. That's not what compare means. You have to be actively comparing them. So use words like greater than, lower risk, more likely, or in contrast to. This shows you get the unique differences of each setting. For example, you could compare the risk of another norovirus outbreak. You'd explain why the risk is high in the residential home, with all the shared activities and social contact. Then you'd contrast that with the nursing home, where the risk of something like a healthcare-associated infection might be even greater because the residents there are more medically vulnerable. Always explain why the risks are different. All right, ready to climb up to a merit? That's what M1 is all about. This is where you go beyond just describing and comparing, and you start really evaluating how effective the laws are. Think of this as your M1 ladder. You've got 6 rungs to climb for each piece of legislation to really show you're evaluating. Following this structure ensures you're giving a proper, well-rounded evaluation, not just a simple description. So, say you're looking at the Health and Social Care Act. First, you'd explain what it is, then you would apply it. A clear strength is that it gives the Meadows Group legal standards they have to follow, but for a limitation, you could talk about how tough it might be to enforce those standards perfectly all the time. The key is to always look at both sides of the coin. And that's really the heart of it. Evaluate doesn't just mean listing pros and cons. After you've talked about the strengths and limitations of a law for a place like the Meadows Short Stay Center, you have to wrap it up with your own reasoned judgment. How effective is it really? Whew, okay, that was a lot, I know. So let's bring it all home. We're going to pull everything we've talked about into one simple blueprint that you can keep right next to you while you write. And here it is, your 1-page plan of attack. This is your cheat sheet, really. For P1, define and link with that 4-step formula. For P2, compare the differences using that comparative language. And for M1, evaluate the laws using the 6-step ladder. It's that straightforward. And I'm going to say it one last time because it is that important. No matter what you're writing about, a term, a risk, a law, your final thought has to connect it back specifically to the residential home, the nursing home, or the short stay center. That specificity is what will make your work stand out. So that's it. You've got the blueprint, you have the formulas, you know the golden rule. The deadline's the 24th, but you are absolutely ready for this. You have all the tools you need. So my question to you is, what's the first term you're going to define? Good luck.